She's just a girl. That engine costs more than her house. No way she's qualified to touch that." That's what they whispered, shoulders shrugged, eyes rolling as Emily Hayes stepped onto the dock with a rusty toolbox and oil on her sleeves. The Seraphina, a $200,000 boat engine frozen in silence, had stumped a team of certified mechanics. The party above deck carried on with cocktails and laughter, but down below, the engine sat lifeless, and no one had a solution. Except maybe, just maybe, the mobile mechanic girl everyone had overlooked. They didn't see what she saw, they didn't hear what she heard, and they certainly didn't believe what was about to happen. Because while others scoffed, she listened. While others dismissed, she went to work, and what followed left the entire marina speechless. Before we begin, let us know in the comments where in the world are you watching from, and if you believe determination still matters more than titles, hit that subscribe button. Let's get started. In a quiet lakeside town where luxurious yachts often glided in for the summer, a young woman named Emily Hayes moved through life with a quiet resolve. At just 26, she ran her own mobile mechanic service from an aging truck, more rust than paint, once belonging to her father. The inside had been lovingly converted into a tiny but efficient hydraulic repair shop. Her father, once the town's most trusted marine mechanic, had passed away from cancer 6 years ago. Most thought his legacy would end with him. Emily, slender and soft-spoken, had been a fixture in his workshop during her teenage years, more an observer than a participant. No one expected her to take the helm of his dream. But she did. When he died, Emily inherited more than his truck. She carried forward a vision to bring hydraulic engine services to remote boaters who couldn't afford flashy marina technicians. Yet the town wasn't ready. A young woman bent over greasy engine parts challenged their assumptions. Some pitied her, others scoffed. That girl mechanic, they'd mutter, with an odd mix of curiosity and condescension. But Emily never responded. She let her hands do the talking, just as her father once had. It was a humid summer morning, the lake still blanketed in mist, when Emily was crouched beside an aging canoe at the edge of the dock, replacing spark plugs for Mr. Harris, a retired fisherman who always paid her in cash and compliments. Her hands were already blackened with grease when her phone buzzed. A voice on the other end was clipped and urgent. "We need someone for an engine failure on the Seraphina. They say you might be able to help." The Seraphina, a floating palace worth millions, owned by one of the lake's wealthiest families, had suffered a complete engine failure overnight. The main Yanmar V8, valued at $200,000, had reportedly sputtered into silence after coughing smoke into the midnight air. With a party of executives on board, time was money. Emily didn't hesitate. She cleaned her hands, grabbed her kit, and drove the rumbling truck to the marina. But as soon as she stepped onto the pier, the atmosphere changed. A line of uniformed technicians stood waiting not for her, but for someone else, someone qualified. One of them, a man in his 50s with a salt and pepper mustache and a badge that read Chief Engineer, eyed her with clear disdain. "We called for an engineer," he said, eyes narrowing. Not some art school dropout playing grease monkey. Emily stood still, absorbing the blow in silence. It wasn't the first time. Probably wouldn't be the last. She turned slightly, ready to walk away with dignity, when a woman's voice cut through the awkward silence. "Wait!" The voice came from the deck above, a woman with silver-streaked hair, a tailored linen blouse, and eyes that had seen storms. Clara, the yacht's manager, had noticed something on Emily's truck, her eyes fixated on the faded logo painted on the side. "Was your father Robert Hayes?" she asked quietly. Emily nodded. Clara's expression softened. "He once fixed my engine in the middle of a storm when no one else would." "You have 30 minutes. The crew bristled. Some exchanged doubtful looks. Others chuckled. But Emily didn't respond. She simply rolled up her sleeves, stepped onto the gangway, and entered the engine room. As she descended into the cramped metal belly of the Seraphina, she didn't think about the doubts, or the insults, or even Clara's unexpected kindness. Her mind was already in diagnostic mode, listening for rhythm, feeling for imbalance, sensing the mechanical language only few understood. She had half an hour to prove not just herself, but her father's name. The engine room of the Seraphina was hot and cramped, thick with the scent of old oil and overheated metal. Emily didn't flinch. The Yanmar V8 loomed before her like a sleeping beast, powerful, silent, and stubborn. She set her toolkit down and let silence guide her. No sudden movements. No panic. Her fingers brushed the surfaces lightly, noting the uneven warmth of metal casings. She listened, not just with her ears, but with the instinct she'd sharpened under her father's watchful eye. The system had failed after repeated misfires. A lesser mechanic would suspect the fuel lines or battery relay. But Emily listened closer. There, underneath the silence, was a faint metallic rattle, almost imperceptible. It wasn't just a misfire. It was misalignment. She closed her eyes, visualizing the hydraulic system, the cooling lines, the fuel injectors. Something didn't sit right. Too much pressure on the coolant valves. A delay in exhaust expulsion. Then she spotted it, a minor deviation in a weld line. Invisible unless you knew where to look. A fractured internal weld had caused a critical vapor lock so rare, most wouldn't even check for it. On the deck above, the crew laughed as they drank coffee, unconvinced that the girl in the grease-stained jumpsuit could do what seasoned engineers couldn't. One of them peeked into the room, smirking, still poking around. Emily ignored him. She asked for a micro-welding torch and a new heat seal unit. The assistant hesitated, but Clara motioned for him to comply. With her father's old welding gloves, patched but reliable, she carefully adjusted the joint. Her breathing slowed. Every spark, every hum of the tool reminded her of the garage where she first learned to hold a wrench with purpose. Time ticked away. 30 minutes, then 40. The crew was getting restless. Clara watched silently, her faith unwavering. Then, with a deep breath, Emily turned the ignition. The engine coughed once, then again, and roared to life. Smooth, no smoke, no protest, just steady, rhythmic purring. The laughter upstairs stopped. One by one, the crew gathered at the hatch, peering down in disbelief. The chief engineer stared, mouth slightly open, as if struggling to understand how he'd missed something so critical. Emily stood up, sweat tracing her jawline, eyes calm. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply whispered under her breath. "You always said engines speak to those who listen, Dad." And in that moment, she wasn't just the girl mechanic anymore. She was the one who resurrected the heart of a $1 million yacht, while everyone else just watched. The hum of the engine echoed like a heartbeat through the steel belly of the Seraphina. For a long moment, no one said a word. The boat, once stranded and silent, now thrummed with life, its pulse restored by the one person everyone had underestimated. The chief engineer stood stiffly at the entrance of the engine room. His earlier smugness was gone, replaced by something closer to confusion, maybe even guilt. Emily wiped her hands, leaving faint black smudges on a rag that had seen better days. She didn't look at anyone. She just went about cleaning her tools, methodical and calm. It was how she processed through movement, not words. The engineer finally stepped closer, his voice quieter now. "How did you know?" he asked. Emily looked up, her gaze steady but not hostile. "My father taught me to listen first. Machines speak sometimes in whispers. You just have to care enough to hear them." He nodded slowly, then stepped back, unsure of what else to say. From the upper deck, Clara called down, "Join me for tea. Emily." Emily hesitated. She wasn't used to being invited, especially not after jobs like this. But something in Clara's voice, soft, familiar, pulled her upward. The lake breeze was gentle, brushing through the crisp linen awnings above the deck. Clara poured 2 cups without asking, setting one in front of Emily with the ease of someone who had made peace with many storms. "You know," Clara began, "your father once saved my yacht during a hurricane off the Gulf. Everyone else had abandoned ship, but not Robert. He stayed below deck for hours, came up drenched, smiling, saying, 'She'll live,' and she did." Emily listened silently, the memory a thread between past and present. Clara studied her. "Today," she said quietly, "I saw him again, not in your face, but in your hands, in your patience." Emily swallowed hard. Words didn't come easy when they carried the weight of memory. "I don't do this for recognition," she finally said. "It's just something I know how to do, something I want to do right." Clara smiled. "That's exactly why you're different." Below them, the crew had fallen quiet. The man who once mocked Emily now studied her from afar, not with ridicule, but reflection. It was the first time someone like him had to face the possibility that skill and wisdom had nothing to do with gender, age, or presentation. Emily stood to leave, her tools packed, her job done. As she stepped off the deck, a young apprentice from the crew called out, "Hey, what you did? That was amazing." She gave a small nod, not stopping. Because for Emily, validation didn't need applause. It only needed engines that roared again, and maybe, just maybe, a few minds that changed along the way. A week later, the morning sun painted golden streaks across the still waters of the lake. Emily was beneath her truck, replacing a rusted oil line, when she heard the distinct crunch of dress shoes on gravel. She slid out, squinting into the sunlight, and saw Clara standing there, flanked by 2 marina officials and a man in a navy blazer with a yacht club emblem. "Emily," Clara began, smiling gently, "we have a proposal for you." Emily wiped her hands and stood, still in her grease-stained coveralls, unsure of what to expect. "We'd like to offer you an exclusive maintenance contract," the man in the blazer said, "for all 8 yachts in our fleet. Routine upkeep, emergency repairs, custom retrofits. You'll have full autonomy." Emily's eyes widened. It was more than a job, it was a vote of confidence from the very world that once doubted her. "There's one condition," Clara added, her tone light. "You don't stop using that old truck. It's part of the charm." Emily chuckled softly. She's not going anywhere. Over the following weeks, Emily's schedule filled with appointments across the lake region. The once dismissive marina crew now greeted her with nods of respect. The same dock where she once stood alone was now a space where apprentices hovered nearby, trying to learn just by watching. Her old truck got a new coat of paint. The faded logo bearing her father's name remained, but beneath it, in neat silver lettering, was a new addition. A daughter's hand, a father's legacy. Word of her precision work spread. Not through social media, Emily had no online presence. It was whispered between captains, praised at yacht club luncheons, and recommended in quiet marina offices. She never asked for attention, but it found her anyway. She still lived simply. No flashy tools, no brand new uniforms, just her truck, and the steady rhythm of machinery brought back to life. Her clients often found her on the floor of her mobile workshop, humming softly as she adjusted a fuel regulator or polished a valve seat. One afternoon, while tuning a yacht's cooling system, a boy no older than 10 stood nearby, watching intently. "Are you really a mechanic?" he asked. Emily smiled. "What do you think?" "You don't look like the ones in movies." She handed him a wrench. "That's probably a good thing." He grinned. For Emily, the reward wasn't just the contract or the admiration, it was the quiet fulfillment of continuing her father's dream, on her terms. And as the engines roared and the lake shimmered beneath wide-open skies, she knew she had found her place, not just as a mechanic, but as a keeper of legacy. Months passed, and the rhythm of the lake followed its own timeless beat. Boats came and went, engines roared and rested, but one constant remained Emily. No longer the quiet shadow beneath a truck. She had become a familiar, respected figure across the marina, yet she hadn't changed in the ways others might expect. Her jumpsuit was still the same shade of worn gray, and her hair was still tied in a low, practical knot. She still brought her lunch in the same dented metal box, still tuned engines with the same pair of gloves stitched by her father. But something inside her had shifted. Confidence, once flickering, now glowed steady. She spoke more, not louder, just more certain. When she explained mechanical principles to curious dockhands or gave patient guidance to a struggling apprentice, there was a grounded warmth in her voice. She no longer second-guessed her worth, nor waited for approval. The work itself was proof enough. One evening, Clara invited her to a formal event, a marina gala. Emily hesitated. The thought of silk dresses and polished shoes felt so far from where she belonged. But Clara insisted. She showed up in a simple navy dress, hair brushed and clean boots polished, and when the yacht club president raised his glass to toast the one who keeps our fleet alive, all eyes turned to her. Emily felt a flush rise to her cheeks, but she didn't shrink. She stood, gave a small nod, and simply said, "Thank you for listening when the engine spoke." The room laughed gently, charmed. Later that night, back in her truck, she sat with the engine off, wrapped in silence. She pulled out an old photo, her father, oil-streaked and grinning, arm around a much younger version of herself. For years, she had chased his footsteps. Now, she realized, she'd carved her own path beside his. What surprised her most wasn't the recognition or respect, it was the quiet joy she felt when others started believing in themselves because of her. Like the teenage girl who asked to shadow her during weekends, or the single mother who said, "My daughter watched your story and now wants to build engines." Emily never set out to be a symbol, but she became one not by shouting, but by showing up, day after day, and doing the work better than anyone expected. Through every valve replaced and every engine restored, she wasn't just fixing machines, she was repairing something deeper, the belief that heart, discipline, and legacy mattered more than appearances. And perhaps, in that space between silence and steel, she had grown into something her father would have never dared dream. A quiet revolution in coveralls. It was late autumn when Emily received a handwritten letter in her mailbox, thick parchment, Navy seal, no return address. Inside, a simple message. "We don't need noise to know you're here. The engines speak loud enough. The captain's." She smiled and folded it carefully, placing it alongside a small tin box where she kept memories of her father, his first wrench, a grease-stained notebook, and the pocket watch he wore every day in the shop. That small box, dented and simple, held more wealth than any yacht she'd ever repaired. The lake was preparing for winter. Boats were docked, covered, resting. But Emily remained busy. She wasn't just maintaining engines anymore. She was mentoring, teaching, passing on her craft in the same quiet way it had once been given to her. Every Thursday, a handful of students, some young, some older, gathered at her makeshift workshop near the edge of town. No tuition, no application, just curiosity and the willingness to get their hands dirty. She taught them how to listen. To what a teen once asked. "To everything machines try to say before they break," she replied. "And to yourselves, because sometimes your gut knows before your head does." Her students weren't always future engineers. Some just needed a safe space. Some came to learn focus. Some came to remember that they were capable of building, not just surviving. Emily had never asked to lead a movement, but one had begun not with slogans or headlines, but in whispered admiration and silent nods. Her story had quietly traveled far beyond the lake, featured in boating magazines, whispered at mechanic conferences, even referenced in classrooms discussing women in trades. Still, Emily stayed. Stayed with the lake, with the engine rooms, with the silence she cherished more than fame. Because legacy, she knew now, wasn't about recognition. It was about staying true day after day to the thing you love, even when no one's watching. One frosty morning, she stood beside the truck, watching mist swirl over the water. Clara walked up, hands in coat pockets, and handed her a new sign. It was wooden, hand-carved, simple. "The Pulse Keeper." Emily tilted her head. "That's what they call you now," Clara said. "Not just a mechanic. You keep this place breathing." Emily touched the sign, then looked across the lake. Somewhere beneath that vast water, her father's ashes had been scattered years ago. And now, every engine that roared, every gear that turned, every young hand learning to hold a wrench, it all whispered the same, quiet truth. He wasn't gone. He lived in every fix she made. And she, Emily Hayes, the quiet girl in the truck, had become the lake's beating heart. Anyone can learn to fix what's broken if they're willing to stay patient, get their hands dirty, and never let judgment speak louder than passion. As the final leaves drifted across the marina docks, Emily Hayes closed the hood of her father's old truck, not to end a job, but to begin something new, a program for young minds who had once been told, "This isn't for you." This time, they'd hear something different. She knew now the dream that once lived quietly in her heart wasn't hers alone. It belonged to every girl handed a doll instead of a wrench, every small-town teen with a big mind, and every soul ever told they weren't strong, smart, or loud enough. The girl once mocked for chasing engines had become the woman rebuilding how others see themselves. Because for Emily and for those who follow the garage was never the end of the road. It was only the ignition. The end? Up next, 2 more powerful stories waiting for you. Click to stay inspired and hit subscribe if you believe quiet hands can change the world.